Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Well, before we begin, I'd just like to say thank you, everyone, for joining us, everyone who's in person and everyone on the live stream. It's wonderful to see you all here today. And I'd also like to give a huge thank you to the church and all of our sponsors for making this concert happen. So, next slide, please. So, La Femme Vaillante translates to the valiant woman. Now, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines valiant as possessing or showing bravery, boldness, or courageous. In my opinion, Augusta Holmes is the complete embodiment of valiant. So during her time, women were mostly discouraged from composing, and the women who were allowed to compose only really composed small-scale works, because those were considered feminine works, small-scale meaning works for voice and piano like you'll hear today. But Augusta Holmes was unique because she was also famous for composing really large-scale works. She composed symphonic works, operas, choral pieces, and she was really celebrated for this. But she was also facing a lot of adversity for this as well, and people called her virile and bombastic, and it was considered inappropriate. But despite all of that adversity, she was very famous and very well respected. And in fact, no other French female composer before World War I composed more for orchestra than she did, but somehow we never hear of her today. And along with her music compositions, she was also famous for having a beautiful contralto voice, for being a virtuoso piano player, and a great poet, and also for her mesmerizing beauty. And she was a muse to many. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So for instance, this handsome gentleman right here, a French painter, Henri Regnault, met Augusta during a musical salon, and he was so inspired by her beauty that he was able to get over his creative block and envision what Thetis might have looked like in his painting of Achilles in Thetis. And this painting went on to win the Prix de Rome. And there were more. Next slide, please. And then there's the famous composer Camille Saint-Saëns, who's quoted as saying, "We were all in love with her. Literary men, savants, painters, musicians, any one of us would have been proud to make her his wife." And there were more. Who would soon be her composition instructor, César Franck, is quoted as saying that Augusta arouses in me the most unspiritual desires. And there was quite the scandal, actually. So when he premiered his composition, the piano quintet in F minor, when this was premiered, he had the previous guy, Saint-Saëns, playing it on the piano. And as he was playing it, he was sight reading it, in other words, playing it after not having seen it before. And he was getting angrier and angrier as he was playing on stage. And then when he finished the performance, he stormed off stage, wouldn't even shake César Franck's hand, because somehow it was apparent to him that this piece of music was his passionate feelings towards Augusta. I don't know exactly how he knew this, but apparently his wife also knew too. And it was this huge thing. She publicly denounced the piece and everything. It was very interesting. So then we have more. So there was the author, André Théorier. He was so inspired by her beauty that he based the main character, Miroslani, on Augusta Holmes in his book Mademoiselle Guignon. And if you could turn to the next slide, please, there is a really fun quote in the book that gives us kind of an idea of what she may have been like in real life. She called each one by his first name and treated all of them with equal familiarity, more as their comrade than as a woman. Gorgeous in her black dress with blonde hair, which seemed to float around her face and in which she had pinned a red geranium. She went from one to another, fully enjoying her effect upon them, uplifting them with a sudden lyrical outburst, and then shattering them with a limpid peal of laughter. The laugh of a child, I would often say, which was in sharp contrast to her Olympian poses. "How do you like my menagerie?" she asked a friend as she drew her over to the piano. Her friend admired the dexterity with which she handled these sensitive egos and ardent imaginations. "My dear," Mira answered, tossing her hair behind her head with a totally virile gesture. "You know the method that animal tamers use. They always look their beasts straight in the eye. I do the same thing and never lose my self-control." So these were just a few of the many men who were infatuated with her, including the famous composer Liszt, Émile Deschamps, the conductor Hans Richter, and so on. But this is I want to make this point. There is no proof that she had romantic relations with any of these men. As far as we know, there was only one man that she actually had romantic relations with, and that was the famous author and music critic Coutu Mondes. And it's believed that they were together for roughly 20 years, but we'll talk more about this later. So let's start from the beginning. So Augusta Holmes was born in 1847 in Paris, France. Both of her parents were of Irish heritage and traveled over to France from England, and her mother also had a little bit of Scottish. And both parents were heavily involved in the arts. Her father had a huge library that Augusta would, it was said that she was always having her head in the book or playing outside. They lived in Versailles, and it was really beautiful. And her mother was a famous poet as well, and she was great friends with the poet Alfred de Vigny. And both of her parents were very connected with all the artistic and literary circles of the time. And Augusta was encouraged to be involved in all of the arts except for music. She begged her mother to do music, and her mother would not let her. And sadly, it wasn't until her mother died when she was 11 that her father let her study music. So her early educational background in music looked different from her male peers. While they were allowed to study at the Paris Conservatoire, she was limited to private study. But she did have private lessons in piano, clarinet, voice, harmony, fugue, and counterpoint, and also voice. And she began composing at the young age of 12 and published her first melody at age 14. Her father was very supportive, and he escorted her to all of the music salons, and she befriended many of the most prominent artistic and literary figures of her day, and she became very highly respected and well known for her song compositions, her virtuoso piano playing, and beautiful singing. And we'll go to the next slide, please. So Augusta and her father were huge supporters of Richard Wagner and would eventually join his social circle, along with her soon-to-be lover, Coutu Mondes, and his wife, Judith Gautier. before we talk about that, I want to tell you how her compositions were very much, her musical style was very much influenced by his, and also in that, like Wagner, she wrote the text to almost everything. So all of her own poetry. So everything you're going to hear today is also poetry written by her. And we'll go to the next slide, please. So it was around 1868, during one of these visits with Wagner, that some scholars believe that Augusta and Catulle met and began having an affair. Hints of this were given with letter correspondence between his wife, Judith, and Wagner's wife, Cosima. Augusta's father sadly died in 1869, and some scholars believe that she was actually pregnant with her first child at this time, and in 1870 gave birth to her first child shortly after that. Even though she knew about it, Catulle's wife, Judith, remained married to him, but they legally separated in 1874. But I want to say, we'll never really know the full truth of history, like what actually happened. And there's actually a lot of rumor that Judith had an affair with Wagner. And he was married, so we don't really know. But anyways, we'll go to the next slide, please. It's believed that Catulle and Augusta had a total of 5 children, and 2 boys and 3 beautiful girls who are illustrated in this lovely painting by Renoir titled The Daughters of Catulle Mondes. Now, Augusta never actually publicly acknowledged her children. They actually didn't live with her. It's believed that they lived with Catulle's widowed father and took his name. And so the reason for this was when her father died, she inherited the house, she inherited the money, and for a woman of her time, she had a lot of freedom because of that. If she were to have married Catulle and acknowledged her children, she would have lost all of that freedom. But I want to say, Nancy Thiemann talks about this in her dissertation, that she was actually seemingly a very loving mother despite this fact. There is evidence of correspondence that she had with them, and it seems like they had close and loving relationships. And generally, people described her as being a kind, warm-hearted, and generous woman. We'll go to the next slide, please. So with this freedom, she hosted musical and literary salons at her home regularly, and her lover, Catulle Mondes, would come, and he was one of the founders, actually, of the Parnassian School of Poets. And he would come with his friends, some of the greatest poets of the time, and they would share their poetry, and some of the most renowned musicians of the time would come as well. And she was highly respected for not just her poetry, but her music in all these circles, and these men considered her an equal as a writer and as a composer. So you're going to notice today, when you look, if you're familiar with Parnassian poetry, that there's a lot of that influence in the text. We're going to have the translations up here. So themes like dreams and visions, mythology, and symbolism of flowers. And another quick note about the program, while I'm talking about her life in chronological order, I'm not going to be actually singing her music in chronological order. I picked and chose different songs that I believe kind of reflect the different seasons that she has in her life. So this first half of the program are more lighthearted love songs to reflect her joy and passion for composing and the romantic nature of her life, and also I had to include her lighthearted Christmas song, Noel, because it was one of her most famous songs, and here we are in the Christmas season, so I thought it was appropriate. Just gonna take my mic off. now, where is the mic on? Oh, okay. Technical difficulties, we're back. All right, so now we're in the second half of her life, in the year of 1870. During this time was the year of the Franco-Prussian War. And Augusta became very patriotic during this time. She actually served in the war as an ambulance aide, and on her 22nd birthday, in 1872, she became a naturalized French citizen, and she added the accent grave to her name, changing her last name from Holmes to Olmes. And the war inspired her to compose patriotic music. And then we'll go to the next slide. So it is believed that around 1875, she began composition studies with César Franck, the man you saw earlier who was in love with her. During this time, her compositional style started evolving. She went from writing smaller scale art songs to composing really large scale works. In 1876, she moved from Versailles to Paris, France, and in 1878, she entered into her first competition. It was the City of Paris competition, and she won second place with her patriotic and dramatic symphony, Lutèce. So then in 1880, she entered in the City of Paris competition again with another dramatic symphony, Les Argonautes. And this caused quite the uproar. So 8 out of the 10 judges, who were all of the musicians on the board, voted in favor for her to win the competition. And then only 2 of the judges, who were just city officials and not even musicians, voted against it, most likely because she was a woman. So because of this, she placed second instead of first. And though this is not good that that happened, for her it actually was, because all of the headlines were about her at the time, and everyone began talking about her. And this scandal actually made her even more famous, so it was actually a good thing. So during this period of time, she achieved several notable milestones, including in 1882, she composed the symphonic poem Irlande to express her pride in her Irish heritage, and this remained popular in Ireland for years after her death. It's actually my favorite piece that's recorded of hers, so I suggest you go listen to it. You can hear it on Spotify. In 1889, she was commissioned to write the Ode Triomphale for the Paris World's Fair, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. And this monumental work required 1,200 musicians, 13 different choirs, and it was just a huge work, and took place in the Palace of Industry. And then in 1889, there's actually some evidence that her relationship with Catulle Mendès began to fall apart. And interestingly, during that same year, she composed one of the songs that I'll be singing in the second half of the program, titled La Princesse sans cœur, meaning the princess without heart. And while the lyrics are written from the male perspective, I believe that the text was actually her own feelings of heartbreak and unrequited love with Catulle. So I think that he's actually the princess in the poem. And so the first part of the second half of the program, I picked 4 songs to highlight this difficult period of heartbreak during her life from her set of 20 melodies. But I should note that this heartbreak did not deter her from more huge successes. In 1890, she received a commission from Florence, Italy, to compose the cantata, the Hymn to Peace, for the Festival of Beatrice and Dante, and it was such a great success. There were over 4,000 spectators. She got 18 standing ovations, and people were throwing flowers at her feet. It was a really big deal. Sadly, shortly after this, she faced a series of really big hardships. Her opera, La Montagne Noire, that she began composing a decade earlier, premiered in 1895. But it only ran for 11 performances, and this was considered a failure. Thanks to research by musicologist Dr. Anastasia Bellina Johnson, she uncovered a possible reason as to why this may have happened. There was a reviewer who actually wrote, "We should not allow women composers into our opera houses and concert halls." So it could have been after this review that they stopped having her performances. And then even worse, in 1896, her son Raphael passed away. And Catulle Mondes officially divorced his wife Judith. And it wasn't to marry Augusta, it was to leave her and go off and marry a younger woman. And after they separated, she was actually left penniless, almost penniless. And it's not really known as to how exactly this happened. Different sources say different things. Some people say that she was really generous and he spent all of her money and left her penniless. Some people said that maybe she didn't even have a big inheritance to begin with. We don't really know why, but despite all of this hardship, she remained hopeful, and she turned to religion, I believe, to help her get through her struggles. She was actually always into the divine, into the mystical. It was said that she was always seeking the mystical. And in 1901, after having been friends with a Catholic priest for some time, she decided to convert to Catholicism and added the Catholic name Patricia to her name. And this influence can especially be heard in her last song, Le Lys Bleu, or the Blue Lily. I think that the novice in the poem kneeling at the altar actually represents her. I think she was actually writing about herself here. And so whether she was Catholic or, doesn't really matter, but the point I'm trying to make is she was always in her life looking to a higher power to help her with her struggles. And she always remained really positive despite the big struggle she had. So I wanted to end the program with her set of divine tales to highlight this aspect of her personality. So, interesting. This is really actually kind of creepy. It's said that she wore an amethyst ring, and she always used to say, it was her favorite ring, and she always used to say, if the stone were to ever fall out, I know it'll be my last day on earth. So it's said that the stone actually fell out in the beginning of January in 1903. And then shortly after that, she actually had a heart attack and died in the same month, in January 28th of 1903, which is kind of crazy. So as we move to the last sets of songs, I want to leave you with this quote of hers. You will see how beautiful I will be when I am dead. Happiness will shine from my face because I will possess my ideal. Sought after in vain on this earth, a smile will be on my closed lips.
Besos chant